Welcome to Girl Choose Yourself, where we're trading self-doubt for self-trust and settling for soaring. I'm your host, Emer Zone, and together here we're building the confidence to create lives so deliciously bold that they scare us a little. In the best possible way, of course, because life's too damn precious and too short to stay cozy in our comfort zones. It is time to choose ourselves for life so damn fabulous and soulfully fulfilling that we have to keep pinching ourselves to check if we're dreaming. Let's do this. Today we're joined by Rachel Redmond, and Rachel is a doctor of Oriental medicine who combines ancient wisdom with modern science to help women restore balance in their lives. After healing herself from 20 years of digestive issues and navigating her own journey through loss, she developed the Yin Way program, teaching women how to thrive by honoring both their inner and outer well-being. Rachel, welcome to the podcast. I'm so excited to have you here and be in conversation with you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I want to jump right in, and I want to bring you to a moment that we've spoken about before, which is really a moment when I feel you were kind of coming to this realization that you were stuck in what I call in my work like a waiting room, like you were living by the expectations of others, or cultural expectations, really, in this case, when you found yourself as a young mom. I think your son was less than a year at the time, and you were like really running yourself ragged, trying to do all the things. So if you can kind of take us into that moment and kind of tell us how that felt and kind of how you came to that realization that this isn't working.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. My son was probably under a year, maybe he was 8 months old. And at that time, I was mostly staying at home with him, but also starting to build my acupuncture practice and starting to try and create this online course or just some online offering. And so I was very busy doing business things, but I was also home and didn't really have a lot of help or childcare or anything. So I remember one night I was washing bottles at the sink and the kitchen is a mess and I'm exhausted. And I'm just having this internal dialogue, like, what is wrong with me? Like, I can't do it all. I can never get it all done. It's never going to be enough. I'm never going to be enough. Kind of just this, like, just feeling really down and feeling just completely overwhelmed and really burned out with all of the things. And then I was just standing there and then I had this like light bulb moment that I was like, oh, wait, maybe the problem isn't with me. Maybe, I'm fighting against like this internal fight against all these expectations of what a mother should do and be and how she should look and how she should feel, and a working mother at that. And I started to realize that what I was striving for was just this cultural conditioning, this like expectations of how things should be. And when I was able to separate what like those expectations from what I was feeling, I was able to realize like, oh, there's actually nothing wrong with me. I'm just trying to live up to this impossible standard. And that was a real light bulb moment for me because I could start to unravel a little of that like individual shame and blame and guilt over not feeling like I could do it all.
And I think that's a story that will just resonate. I mean, I'm a mom too, and I absolutely resonated with that story, and so many will, because the picture perfect that we see often on social media, or just even as you're preparing to be a new mom and you just go into the stores and you look at the beautiful nurseries and you flick through the glossy magazines and you imagine that you're just going to skip along into this new version of yourself. It will look beautiful and everything else will manage to find some balance and fall into sync. Mm-hmm. And it's so easy to feel like you're failing. When was that first kind of, did you feel that like in your body? I know that the work that you do is very holistic, the real integration of the mind, body, spirit systems. Can you speak a little bit about how you feel into that when something is out of alignment and you need to make a change?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it often presents as anxiety. So I was feeling incredibly anxious at that time and down and depressed. So I know when I'm feeling those things, anxiety for me can like be this like pressure in my chest or this tightness in my chest or this like kind of feeling like my insides are running around inside of me. So when I am aware of those things, then I can often see, okay, something is not right. And this is my cue to kind of turn inward and see like what's going on, what's not matching up here, and what am I going to do to kind of try and shift things for myself.
And I think that's the big challenge, really. There's knowing that this isn't working, right? I cannot meet this impossible standard. And I have to find something. And in a lot of the work that you do, I know you're primarily working with women. And there is this kind of resistance or feeling that taking time for yourself or stepping off of this productivity sort of treadmill and doing is, it feels almost dangerous to us that if I get off that treadmill, I won't be able to get back on, or I'll lose value or importance. Like rest is almost dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because there's two things there. I would say, just kind of going back to that insight I had, once I realized that, there was a tremendous amount of relief that I had. I was like, oh, I don't have to keep striving towards this unrealistic expectation. So on one side of me, it was like, oh, thank goodness, like I can put that aside, I can put that down. But then in the practical part, like the everyday part, it does feel like, but there's all these things to do, and I have all this laundry, and I have to write these emails, and I have to do X, Y, and Z. And so you're right. It doesn't really feel safe in our nervous system to rest, because we feel like rest should come once we've done all the work. And it's not really how it works. We have to build in the rest so that we can continue, running the marathon and showing up for everybody else. So we have to start to kind of shift how we go about things, because there's always going to be more laundry, there's always going to be more emails, and there's always going to be the next thing. So if we don't start to preemptively like switch into rest and try to put the value in that, understand that there's a lot of value in rest, there's value in slowing down, that if we don't make that switch, we're just going to burn ourselves out into the ground. And then we're going to have to dig ourselves out of this hole. And it's going to take a whole lot more time, energy, and resources to pull ourselves up from that hole, rather than just kind of trying to maintain at a more, moderate pace, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I think you've really spoken to one of these sort of cultural messages that we are experiencing, and we get so much direct and sort of subliminal messaging around rest, that you have to earn rest.
Mm-hmm.
And in your work, you speak about, the balancing and the integration between the yin and the yang. And you talk about the yang. If you could just explain that a little bit for our listeners, and how, the imbalance, what society's messages, where that they're fitting versus what we need as holistic beings.
Sure. Yeah. So as I'm trained as an acupuncturist, so I see the world through this lens of yin and yang. And yin and yang represent, they're interconnected, and they're this dynamic balance. So we need both, daytime and nighttime, in order to have balance and harmony. And so what I was starting to notice was that we live in this culture, in this society, that prioritizes and values everything that has to do with what's associated with yang. That's activity, that's extroversion, that's going fast and being busy and being stimulated, and sunshine and daytime and all of these things. And then what I started to notice, that as a society, we also devalue and deprioritize everything that's associated with yin, which is slowness and stillness and self-reflection and moving inward and quiet time and just being in that space of not doing anything productive. And when I started to see that as a society, we were so imbalanced, I could start to see how those imbalances were showing up in our bodies. And as someone who specializes in women's health, I mean, there's a direct connection between this, that we use this kind of yang energy, which is heat and fire, and
Yeah.
we kind of burn the candle at both ends. You could say we burn off the yin. And then what happens, this is kind of what happens is that we get more heat in our body. We get more dryness. We get even like hot flashes and night sweats, and a lot of things that have to do with this perimenopause transition is because we have too much of this yang energy and not enough of that yin. We haven't prioritized or made that, like a priority to nurture and support the yin. And so then we see it both in our health. That's a very common pattern. We see it in terms of the climate, global warming, climate change, this lack of, we're just using all the resources of the planet, but we're not giving it time to replenish and rebuild. So we create this massive imbalance, and we can see it both in the macrocosm, but also in the microcosm. And so my work with people is to really kind of see things for how they are, and then step back and say, how am I prioritizing yin in my life? Because chances are most people are not prioritizing rest, stillness, self-reflection, those kind of things. And so some of the work is starting to realize that while society might push us to be busy, do more, get more done, stay up later, drink more coffee, all of the things, that we have to realize that those cues are not necessarily healthy, and that we can start to create balance in our own lives by oftentimes going up against stream of what culture is telling us to do.
Wow. So much wisdom in what you're saying. And it's just kind of, light bulb moments, ding, 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 sort of all over the place for me. And I just want to capture some of those. One thing that you said straight out that I loved was when you talk balance and harmony. I think harmony is such a powerful word, because as women, we've heard, work-life balance, and that just, it falls flat for me. And I think many people, and I've heard many top executives talk about how dangerous just that word balance is when they talk about it in work-life balance. But I think harmony is just a much more almost soul nurturing word. And when you speak about the macro level, sort of us experiencing it almost like on a cellular level in our own bodies, I think that's very powerful. And just because we get the messages of yang, of like the badge of busy, productivity is sort of a badge of honor and busy is a badge of honor, that because those messages are so prolific, it's so easy to believe that they're true. And the yin messages aren't amplified in. Why do you think that is, that we don't hear the yin messages as loudly, that we have to almost go looking for them?
I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons, but if we just step back and see it in terms of yang represents the masculine and yin represents the feminine, for as long as humans have been on this planet, the feminine women have been devalued and deprioritized and are not treated as equals as men. And that's just how it is. And that's the world that we are living in. And so it's no wonder that we value and prioritize everything associated with masculine energy, and that we see the yin or the feminine energy as second best or lesser than or not as important. So I think that we get these messages both like in these huge universal ways, but I think they're already living inside of us. They're programmed into us, potentially, one might argue, because of how many thousands of years we've been living in this kind of state. And so it's like, no wonder it's hard to swim upstream. No wonder it's hard to rest. No wonder it feels dangerous. It's vulnerable. It's not protected. I mean, that is yin, vulnerable, not protected. Yin is like the turtle without its shell. And so it's like, no wonder these things are hard. No wonder it almost feels like we have to go underground in a sense and connect with other women who experience these hardships, because it's not always safe to do so. And I think that's why more and more people are kind of talking about this concept, because we realize, though, in order to find more health, find more wellness, we need to step into that more yin space. And it's not easy, and it becomes a daily practice. And if you think about the symbol of yin and yang, it's not just a circle with a vertical line down the center. It's not even. It's like this wave-like motion. So sometimes there's more black and a little bit of white, in the way that the yin and the yang moves. And sometimes there's more of that white wave and just a little tail of black. And so what that represents is that for balance and harmony, we don't need the things to be equal all the time. We just need them to be like, some days are going to be more filled with work and productivity, but then we need a day to balance that off, and that's more filled with rest. So it's not like every day needs to be half yin, half yang and balanced in that way. It's like more about the flow of a week or a month or a year, and how things create balance over kind of in this broader picture, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. And I love the way there's that fluidity to it, and the way that you explained it, that it's not some rigid practice. It's not a rigid view. It's very much coming from that place of harmony that you spoke of initially. So when people you sort of had your wake up moment then as a young mother, although I know that you were already invested in the work, and you got this really clear insight as a young mother, kind of going, whoa, when I have been helping young mothers and thinking about them taking more time to self-care, now I see that from a whole other real experience perspective. But when people start looking at this and saying, I realize that I'm out of sync, I realize that I'm not living in balance, in harmony, how can someone listening to this who feels like, I hear all the symptoms, I've been trying to do all the things, I've been striving and chasing the trinkets of the productivity economy, I've been a doer, and I need to get off that treadmill, because I know maybe they're at that point, and I've spoken to a lot of women who say, I got to the place that I thought I wanted to be, and it just doesn't feel right. And I think from the lens that you're explaining, how you see things through, that's like, I went for the yang, I went going that way in the striving direction. I'm out of balance with the, how does somebody begin a journey when they realize, darn it, I'm not where I need to be, and I'm beginning to see symptoms emotionally. Yeah. My body, my spirit just feels exhausted.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a few different ways to approach this. And when I work with people, it's more on an individual level and like what they're showing up with. But what I can say is one thing that has helped me a lot and has helped a lot of my clients is to do an exercise that involves you kind of defining what your own personal values are, and kind of walking through, what do I value? What do I prioritize in life? Like for me, I value my health. That's a big value of mine. So I value, relationships, my family, and things like that. And so when you start to identify maybe 3 to 5 of your personal values, then you can put that on one side of the paper. And then on the other side of the paper, you can say, what are society's values, and start to see the gaps in that. Maybe society values money and productivity and success and accolades. But you can say, so that, if you're not really intentional about it, you'll strive for those things that are ingrained in you, but it's not really where it's at. And so when you see what your own personal values are, then you can be making more intentional choices on a daily basis to live into those values. So for example, if this is something that's called choice points. And so let's say, as a young mom, I'd have to make these choices a lot. Okay, I want to, do 20 minutes of exercise while my son naps, but I also need to do X, Y, and Z productivity around the house. But in this moment, my personal value is my health. So I'm going to choose an action that helps me move in the direction of my values. And so when we can start to like make choices on a daily basis that move us towards our personal values, then we start to feel good and healthy and more balanced, because we're doing the specific things that nourish us and move us forward, not the things that we've been told are going to make us happy or, that we should be doing. And so that's often a place that I like to start, just identifying your personal values. And then when you're at a point in the day where you have to make a decision about what to do, you can come back to that and think, what are my personal values? What are society's values? And what am I going to do in this moment?
I think that's really key. I think that's really key because most people are just in reaction to their emotion in the moment or to some old conditioning. They come to one of those choice points and they make a choice based on an emotion, an energy level, or on the expectation of somebody else. And what you're saying there is like how key it is to be intentional. And I do a lot of work with people on values too. And it's just shocking how many people you ask to identify their values and they've never really thought about it. And it is game-changing work to have a different guidance system other than the expectations of something or somebody external guiding you.
Yeah. And all of this requires the ability to kind of be in the present, to cultivate more awareness of yourself, to be more mindful and to have more intentionality around how you move through your life. So it's easy to just kind of be in default, autopilot mode and just go through life and do the things that you've been told to do or are accustomed to doing. But when that's not working out for you, then it's like about, okay, coming back. What am I actually doing? What is the intention behind this? Why am I even doing this? Do I, and kind of breaking it down in that way. And then that awareness can help start to shift and drive new behaviors and new patterns.
And how has that served you in your own life journey? The importance of that, getting really clear for yourself. I mean, it was a pivotal moment when you realized you were off track as a young mom. But how is like knowing what your values are, being really intentional in how you express them, how has that served you on your own path?
Yeah, I mean, I am a high achieving, ambitious kind of, person. And
I
so
know.
right. I'm probably not alone here. And so I've had to work really hard at the exact thing that I'm talking about, because it's served me because it has given me tools to, release the pressure valve. Like sometimes we're our own pressure cookers and we're creating all of this stress and anxiety and just overwhelm, partly because of our thoughts that we're putting on ourselves, our expectations that we're putting on ourselves. And so by doing this work, I've been able in many cases to kind of release that pressure valve so that I can not be so stressed out. I can be more calm. I can be more present with my child and my family. My son was 2 when the pandemic started. Both my husband and I were working from home. My son was home. We're in the thick of it. And sometimes my daily practice was just to release my own pressure valve, which meant like lowering my expectations of what I was going to do that day. And instead of having 20 things on my to-do list, chopping it in half to 10. And then that freed up my energy. And I remember I just spent so much quality time with my son at that time, like you can't get those months and those years back. And so I just feel like it's allowed me to be present in a way that I might not have been. It's allowed me to manage my energy a little bit better, to tap into more calm and compassionate spaces. And we know that stress has such a huge impact on our health, on our hormones, on our immune system, on our gut health, so many things. So I think I can say that I've probably done myself a few favors by figuring out how to release that, pressure valve and lower my stress in that way. It doesn't mean it's always easy or that there's no stress, but it's like can take the level down from a 10 to a 5. That's huge.
Yeah, I think when you talked about like being a highly ambitious person yourself, or a type A personality. And I think lots of people will kind of resonate with that, because even though we may know sort of intellectually that, yeah, if I know my values and if I act in alignment with my values, that will feel good and fulfilling. But the kind of the messaging, the external messaging is so strong about success means XYZ. And that is just always meeting these external metrics, that it's a constant practice to kind of come back home to yourself and what feels right in your own body. Because I know myself, I'll go, oh, I know what feels good, but the validation out there of that definition of success is very compelling. So it's a constant sort of like self-management and kind of building that self-trust. And I think one of the things that really helps there, and I think you've spoken about it before, is looking at, what makes a fulfilling life, and looking at the end of life, people's regrets and what pathway are we on? If we're on this pathway of striving, are we going to end up, as a story in that book, that
The 5 Regrets of the Dying, that book.
Yeah, that one.
Yeah. I think about that a lot. And I think that has guided a lot of this, because it's like, what I don't want to miss, I don't want to regret that I didn't spend enough time with my family, that I didn't, enjoy life, that I didn't pursue my hobbies or my pleasures or things like that, because there's just always going to be more to do, more to earn, more titles to wear. And at the end of the day, it's like, well, and that's where it comes down to values. Like what's most important to me, and what's going to help me live the most rich and fulfilling life that I can. And it's going to look different for different people. And that's beautiful.
Absolutely. The whole definition of success is so personal, and so personal value driven. And I think what I love about the work that you do, and why I'm so interested in it, is how personalized it is. So one of my values is well-being, and I'm also somebody who has a chronic illness of Crohn's disease for years. And I know that when I think about, my own wellness, just the number of, it's information overload when it comes to trying to get on a path of wellness and well-being, I think. And it definitely isn't one size fits all. And we're all different. We're all responding different to our environments and all of the inputs. And can you explain a little bit about how individualized your approach is when you're working with somebody? Because particularly, I'm also a woman who's 55 years old. So there'll be lots of people who listen to who will be interested in hormone health, be maybe perimenopausal, menopausal, so much going on there, just coming into more of an openness in talking about that area for women's health. But I think what you do is so interesting because it's so personalized. Can you just explain, when somebody comes to you, how that personalized approach, what that looks like?
Yeah. So when I am working with a new client, I'm just very curious and wanting to understand, one, what are their main health concerns? And then just, how they live, how they eat, how their stress level is. I'm trying to gather as much as I can, the holistic picture of their life and their health, and also in their health past. And it's going to be different. Let's say 3 women show up and they all have a hot, night sweats and brain fog and weight gain, but the what's driving those symptoms could be different for each person. And so it's really understanding what's driving each of our individual symptoms, and going back to the basics in terms of sleep, stress management, nutrition, connection with relationships. And see, some people are really good at sleeping, but they're not good at some of the other things. So we're trying to see what are the weaknesses in those kind of pillars of health, and how can we start and work with people where they are so that I can help them kind of build better those foundations so that they're not driving those symptoms through, whether it's lifestyle or inflammation or poor digestion. There's a lot of different factors that go into it. So it's just really multifactorial how all the influences that can create someone's health picture. And so it's really kind of getting to those deeper layers, what's driving them, what's driving their habits, and just really working with them at this foundational level to try and build up the best both habits and choices of how, for being healthy, but ones that are really targeted that are going to support the resolution of their symptoms.
Yeah, I think that's so important because most people, and definitely a lot of women, are used to going into places looking for help and not getting that holistic picture and not having the questions, not having those questions asked to them about the different facets of what their life is like so that you can really kind of drill in and go, oh, wait a minute, this might be an area that is influencing what you're experiencing. There's just too much of a blinkered view in many modalities at the moment. And so I know personally, I felt sort of frustrated. I've been in, I remember when I came to the US and I'd already been diagnosed with Crohn's disease and just didn't have my paperwork with me, and going into a doctor who said, oh, I doubt you have Crohn's disease. And I'm going, yeah, I kind of do. And then having another sort of colonoscopy or something. And I'm saying, oh, actually, you do have Crohn's disease. And I said, that's only news to you.
Yeah.
That's only news to you.
Right. Yeah.
Like I knew. Yeah.
And I think a lot of people do feel like they're not being heard in some settings by medical professionals. And, I like to remind people that, like your medical doctors are looking for disease processes. And if you don't show those disease processes, then, you get to go home. But oftentimes people are still not feeling well. And so that's the space where more of this like Eastern or holistic or functional medicine really does really well in, because it's like the lab tests that I do, they're not looking for pathology, but they're looking for like, what's not functioning well or optimally? How can we enhance, your microbiome, or how can we, support, you have too much oxidative stress and inflammation. Like, so we're looking at more of these markers of health and well-being, and how to either minimize ones that are not adding to health or maximize ones that can be. And so it's really just a completely different approach and focus in this more kind of holistic way. And I think both systems are wonderful, and they're like the yin and the yang, where one is really strong and the other maybe is not quite so much, and vice versa. And so they can work really beautifully together. But I think in general, people are not really always getting their needs met. They're not being heard. And it's in that space of lifestyle medicine, nutrition, stress management that is often the most important for people.
I love how you've explained that so beautifully, because I think they do work really well together. I wouldn't be without my sort of medical side of treating the disease that I have, but I am interested in optimizing my health. Mm-hmm. And that is not necessarily what my medical doctor is doing. He's treating something. Mm-hmm. And I think as women, we haven't maybe internalized the worthiness or the receptivity to optimal health, that we deserve it. And it's something that we can invest in, and that will really enhance our ability to experience this life in a much more energetic way. And particularly as women who are getting a bit older, and you start seeing, you're seeing changes in your body and your energy levels, or even young mothers, we see a lot of changes in our energy levels, and our whole, our body has given life to a whole new human, that our well-being is so important, and working to enhance that. And it can be very simple things, like you've said, and then there can be tests looking for, markers where you can say, we could improve that a little bit, and you might experience more energy and more vitality. And to what extent do you see that people, I know, first of all, let me kind of backtrack a little bit. I know people work with you for quite a long time because they see so many benefits and they just want more of it. And I've seen so many of the great reviews and sort of client testimonials of people working with you that it's just so powerful that people just want more and more. I just want to amplify just how important the work that you do is to people and how profoundly it can improve their lives. But do you feel that there's women, when it comes to women doing this work, that they're hesitant in a way because, there's an element of worthiness, or it's okay, I'm fine, it's good enough, or they've kind of internalized a suboptimal level of wellness as just the way things are and that they have to get used to it? Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, it's like you often don't go to the dentist. I guess people do go just to get their teeth clean, but you go to the doctor or the dentist when something hurts you. But things can be not feeling well for a really, really long time before there's there's a tooth pain or something. And so I think we just kind of get used to the fact that oh, well, we can get by, or everyone else is feeling like this, or maybe it's too much effort to do the things to feel better. Maybe I have to change too many things. And but those are just all kind of roadblocks in our ability to feel better. Because when I work with people, especially mothers and women, they often come to me feeling very overwhelmed, not having a lot of time in their life. And so I'm not going to say, okay, do these 10 things. It's let's pick one thing. Let's start one place. If you're drowning, let's throw you a life raft. Let's throw you a buoy so that you can, start treading water a little bit more. And then once you get your head above water, then you can start to see, oh, well, there's a boat over there, there's shore, kind of that kind of thing. So my goal with people is just to work with them where they are and to just say, don't worry about feeling overwhelmed. Sometimes it's a slow process. But the overall goal is to build in helpful habits that are going to be more sustainable. Sustainability is a big thing in the work that I do. I want to help people learn how to read their own body cues, how to make choices, how to move with the seasons, and be able to make choices that are going to be most supportive. So my goal is a lot of education, so that people don't need me in the long term, but also helping people break down those barriers that are probably getting in the way of them reaching out.
Yeah, I think it's such a profound way to choose yourself, is to kind of decide that you're going to value yourself enough to really look after your health and your well-being, and to kind of tap into self-care on a really profound level. Because when you have that, when you can begin to feel re-energized, and you've said it's often, some very simple sort of adjustments for people that can have a profound impact on their energy levels, and then they can show up more for their kids and be more present and less exhausted. You can have a look at what's going on with their hormone health, make some adjustments, and that can have a massive impact on how they're experiencing their day-to-day lives, and allow them to feel more engaged in work and more excited about projects, more engaged in their partnerships. So it really is sort of life-changing work, this moving from just being a doer and kind of being productive and kind of putting up with the exhaustion or the overwhelm, or thinking maybe this is just as good as it gets, to making a shift that actually there's more. And I've just been missing this other pathway of self-nourishment and self-honoring, and more of this yin, light, and energy, which has been burnt by the yang. And I need to rekindle that and kind of nourish that, and in it sort of realize more of myself, because I think we get lost when our health is.
And we often overcomplicate things. We can really overcomplicate things. So my job is often to say, how can we simplify? How can we, bring things back? If you're, for instance, today I've been working. I was like, oh, I'm really tired this afternoon. Why am I so tired? And then I realized, oh, I didn't really eat much breakfast. I just kind of normally I eat more breakfast, and I just didn't actually have a lot of food in me today. And I was like, because my head starts spinning like, oh, what's wrong with me? Why don't I have energy? And I was like, oh, well, duh, I just kind of needed to eat a little bit more protein this morning and like nourish myself a little bit more. So it kind of, it's also this way that we can always come back to it. It's like you don't get to this place where you're always living perfectly or optimally, but then, you have more of a ability to self-reference. And it's like, okay, well, maybe I'm feeling like this because so simple. I just should have eaten a little bit more food tomorrow, eat a little bit more. My energy should pick right back up. So sometimes we overcomplicate it, and it's just quite simple, going back to the basics. And I always start there because the basics are the most powerful, really.
I love how you said that, because it can feel overwhelming when somebody wants to make a change, and just that message of, by simplifying things, you can, well, I sometimes say simplify to amplify, that you keep it simple and you can really, improve the situation. And I think you've also spoken to one thing that I was going to ask you there is like, what do you do in those moments when you feel like the old conditioning may be creeping back in? It must be more, I should do this, I should do the other, the self-judgment. How do you kind of get back on track? And it seems that you've built an inner sort of compass of self-referencing to kind of go, okay, get out of that pattern. Can you speak just a little to that?
Yeah. I think that conditioning is constantly being reinforced every single day. So we also have to kind of keep building up those muscles to counterbalance that. And so for me, it's just about having that awareness about, okay, maybe I feel like this. Let me check in. Why might I be feeling like that? Have I been pushing too hard? Have I not been eating enough? Did I drink enough? Did I sleep enough? Like I kind of go back to those main questions to say, oh, usually it's one of those things if I'm feeling off, So yeah, it's just about building that muscle, I think, of tapping into your values, checking yourself, checking in with yourself, and just being able to kind of put that on repeat so that it becomes easier. It doesn't take as much brain energy to make the choices that are going to be more sustainable and healthy.
So as we're sort of coming towards the end of our conversation, I mean, I could keep talking to you. I just have a couple more questions though. I was interested in what you feel that you've learned about worthiness, what you've learned about worthiness through this journey.
Oh, that's such a good question. I feel like that's a deep question. I think that what comes to mind is that worthiness comes from within, and it can be strengthened by replenishing kind of those inner resources. And worthiness is not something that we can receive from anybody else. It is something that is in there inherently, and it's potentially our job to connect back in with that worthiness, or to try and remove the obstructions to us knowing our own worthiness or feeling that. So I think it's really this inner resource thing, and it's actually just potentially like that deep layer, that deep essence of yin, that internal energy and nourishment that can help us shine our inner lights and everything like that.
That's beautiful. I love what you say about it being there just by nature, and that we're looking to remove those obstacles to allow it to shine and come into fruition. And what would you say to a woman who feels guilty for wanting more space or rest in her life? What are some words of comfort or guidance that you could give to a woman who's feeling guilt around that?
Well, one is that, all emotions are valid. And so I always like to validate, where people are coming from. But when it comes to guilt, my main resource is to go back to those personal values, because, we often feel, okay, that's an example of guilt. Like, I should be, I don't know, doing something for the family, but I'm taking care of myself in this moment. So we can feel guilty. But when we bring it back to our values and priorities. Like maybe we value our health and our family, but it's about making a choice in that moment. And there's no one right choice. And it's just about making that intentional choice and then knowing that the guilt's going to be there and just kind of, reminding ourselves that the choice we're making is there's a reason behind it, and we valued and prioritize that thing. So yeah, guilt, when it comes to guilt, just returning to those values and knowing that no choice is wrong. And guilt is a tricky one, but we can definitely work with that and build up those muscles to make the choices that are going to be supportive.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Well, I've so enjoyed speaking to you today, and I know that many people listening will just be so inspired and also feel seen just by the messages that you've been sharing about the work that you do. And so I'm sure that they will want to be able to connect with you and find you and learn more about the great work that you're doing. So could you share with the audience where they can find you and maybe some key offerings that you feel may be helpful to people who are seeking to kind of develop more of this yin, and they're maybe feeling that they need more of that self-nourishment, that self-care is lacking for them?
Yes. So, well, first, people can contact me through my website. So that's rachel-redmond.com. So just my first and last names with a hyphen in between. So that's an easy way. I have all my info up there. You can reach out and book a free consultation or just a free time to chat and connect with me. You can find me on Instagram as well. And I have several free resources on my website, but one that I want to highlight is a masterclass I did. It's called From Exhausted to Your Best Self. Mm-hmm. And in that one, I go into more of these concepts about yin and yang and go through some three really valuable tips and exercises that you can start to reprogram and retrain your brain so that you can go from that exhausted to that more, feeling like your best self. So I highly recommend that free class.
Fabulous. I'm glad you highlighted that one because I saw that one and said, oh, I really hope she's focusing on this one. It's amazing. And just to clarify for people who are listening in, who are not in the US or who are not in Michigan where you are based, just to confirm that you do consultations online and you do serve people online as well, right?
I do. Yes. Not always with the functional labs. Those might be tricky if you're out of the US, but I work with people 3 and 6 months long and do everything else that I would do. So, yes.
Perfect. Wonderful. Thanks again for your time. It's been amazing.
Thank you for having me. It's been so lovely.
Thank you so much for choosing to spend this time with me today. If you enjoy the episode and it resonated with you, please consider subscribing and share this podcast with someone you know who would benefit from the message. If you'd like to take things a step further, you'll find some free and paid resources in the show notes. And until next time, in the unlikely event that no one has told you this yet today, let me have the profound honor of reminding you that you are truly magnificent and the world is a far better and brighter place because you are here with us all. See you next time.